All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Sasha Blumenfeld and I'm the marketing manager here at Chartio. For those that don't know, Chartio is a cloud business intelligence platform that allows everyone, regardless of technical level, to gather, analyze, and share data with the rest of their company. I am very happy to be talking with today's guest, Steli FD. And before we jump in, just to go over a few housekeeping rules. We will be recording the webinar and we will be sending out the slides and the recording after the webinar, so no need to take rushed notes. And throughout our conversation, please feel free to ask questions. We will answer them all at the end. You can also type into the chat box to your right or put them on Twitter using the hashtag Chartio and Steli. And without further ado, I would like to introduce to you our presenter for today, Steli FD. Steli is a serial entrepreneur and international sales rockstar. He is also the co-founder and CEO of Close.io and Elastic Sales. He was a Y Combinator alumni and an advisor to several startups and entrepreneurs, and the author of Ultimate Startup Guide to Outbound Sales. So without further ado, Steli, thank you for taking the time to present, and please take it away.
Thank you so much. I love the, what was it, international sales rock star. I'm not sure if my team told you to introduce me that way, I assume, but I like it either way. I'm not going to question it. All right, guys, so I appreciate the invitation. I appreciate the group that's gathered to talk about sales metrics and what to track, what not to track, how to be data-driven, specifically on the sales side of things. So I'm going to keep this super short and tight, and I'm going to make sure to cover some really basic, fundamental things that I think are overlooked, cover some areas where many startups make mistakes, and make sure to help you guys avoid those mistakes, and then have some time for Q&A, which is going to be probably the most exciting and valuable part of the whole webinar. All right, so a little bit about myself. Originally from Greece, grew up in Germany, so I have the two opposite ends of the European cultural spectrum to offer. And I dropped out of high school, did a few businesses back in Europe, all bootstrapped, and then 9 years ago I sold everything I had, I bought a one-way ticket to San Francisco, and I arrived in Silicon Valley to build a technology company. Now, that first business was a soul-crushing defeat. I worked on it for 5 years, didn't work out. And the second business, with a few twists and turns, turned out to be a pretty great success, and it's the business that I'm running today. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that business just to set the context and explain to you or demonstrate why both I care about data, and especially data around sales, and why I know a thing or two about it. So when we started the business, we started as Elastic Sales. And what we did with Elastic Sales is we offered B2B startups in Silicon Valley a sales team on demand. So what we would do is we'd offer new companies that had a product that was launched and that had some traction in terms of customers and revenue. We helped them build a predictable and scalable sales model, and then we helped them just putting that new model into work and scaling and growing that a lot faster. So in the process of doing that, we did sales for over 200 venture-backed startups. A lot of the things that we were doing were evolving around experimentation and gathering data so that we could make recommendations on what kind of sales models and sales approaches and sales methodologies would work for any given product and company and market or not work. And it's needless to say that we saw an insane amount of data during those years with Elastic Sales, not just the data that we generated running all these different sales campaigns, but also just really analyzing the data that existed before us, looking into their CRM systems and the funnels and all the metrics that we're able to generate. And we work closely with 200 venture-backed startups, or more than 200, but we talked to thousands of startups. And so we gathered an insane amount of data around sales methodology, sales models, what works, what doesn't, and in the process learned a thing or two on what matters and what doesn't. From day one, as we were building Elastic Sales, we started building internal software. It was called Close.io. And Close.io, we never intended it to be a real software that we released to the world. It was just internal software that we gave to our salespeople, allowing them to outperform other salespeople. And eventually the software got so good and so powerful that in January 2013, we decided to release the software as a separate product. And we thought it would take, it'd be a little side project and it would take many, many years to grow into the size of the services business. And we were wrong. We hit a nerve with Close.io, and within 12 months, Close.io was a much larger business than Elastic Sales, and that was the time when we decided to focus on it. Today, Close.io is the best inside sales CRM, which means that if you do sales through lots of calls and lots of emails, Close.io is the best tool. And part and core of why we built Close.io was that we knew that salespeople hated manual data entry with a passion, like hated doing manual data entry, and because of it, they were exceptionally bad at it. So when we looked at most other CRMs out there, they were filled with garbage data. They were filled with data nobody could decipher. They were filled with data that was out of date, that was incorrect, and it was really hard to make any kind of decisions based on all the stuff that was in the legacy CRMs that we encountered. When we built Close.io, we knew we wanted to eliminate manual data entry, and we wanted to empower salespeople to do what they're good at, which is communicate and drive deals and close deals, and wanted to utilize the software to keep track of all the data and make sure that because the data is based on activity and not on reporting, it's a lot more accurate, and we have a lot more data. So today, Close.io is probably the best CRM when it comes to data quality. And we built a search around it that's pretty powerful, which is going to be the last thing that I'm going to say about Close.io. We built a search engine around the quantity and quality of data that's unparalleled in the sense that you can today get access to the type of data in Close.io no other CRM is going to give you access to. I'll give you one example, and then we'll launch right into the webinar. In Close.io, as an example, today you can go into search and say, show me all active opportunities in a given area where the last thing that happened was that I've sent them an email, they open it, but they've never replied, and that's been, let's say, longer than 2 weeks ago. And out of those, you can even drill down further and say, out of those, I only want to see the ones that I had at least a 5-minute phone conversation with. Boom, Close.io is going to give you a list and drill down the list as you're typing in the search query and show you these are the 7 active opportunities that hit those criteria, and you can either call them one by one or send them a bulk email, and you're done with it. And that's the type of data access and search power that no other CRM can offer you. So that as far as my plug goes for why Close.io is awesome. We're highly profitable. We're growing really fast. Thousands and thousands of salespeople around the world are using us. So we're doing pretty well. If you're interested, just let me know. All right, let's jump. Oh, one last plug, and I'll jump into the webinar. If you like some of the content today, you might like the podcast that I have. I have a podcast that you can find if you go to thestartupchat.com. It's a podcast I host together with my good friend Heaton Shah. Heaton is probably the most data-driven person I know, founder of Crazy Egg and Kiss Metrics. And he comes at things from a marketing perspective. I come at things from a sales perspective. And twice a week, we release a 20-minute podcast where we talk about sales, marketing, data, but we also talk about, worst depression in entrepreneurship, religion in entrepreneurship. No topic is off topic and off limits. So you might want to check it out if you're into podcasts and you want to get kind of bite-sized pieces of content from me on a regular basis. All right, let's talk about data. So, I'm pretty pragmatic. I don't think that I'm the most data-driven human being in the world, right? I'm not. There's certain people and sales thought leaders, they're data ninjas. I'm not. I'm the opposite. I'm not like a spreadsheet ninja. I'm not super into data. I don't get excited about it. I'm not like super in love with it. So I was wondering, why the hell am I giving a webinar about data, right, and about the importance of data? And I think the reason why I do is because I've learned to utilize data as a tool, and I've learned to understand how powerful it can be. So I don't come at data from a dogmatic point of view. I'm come at data from a pragmatic point of view. I have learned to embrace and utilize data to progress my business and move sales forward, and that's how I do it. So I don't come at this from any kind of twisted love relationship that most people might not be able to associate with. I come at this from somebody that's not necessarily super prone to be into data, but has learned to utilize data to move their business forward. So I'm super pragmatic about these things. I've learned that we as human beings are just insanely biased. There's no way around it. There's nothing really you can do about it. It's just the way it is. There's a few habits that you can build to counterbalance that fact and that bias, but you're still a human being. So as human beings, we're going to be distorting information. Our brains work by distorting information, generalizing information, and deleting information. It's just the way our brain operates in order to be able to operate in this world. And based on that and a few other things, we have biases, and these biases are deeply influencing how we look at results and how we interpret results. And I found that data is just a beautiful truth teller. I believe that if you are in a startup and you do sales in a startup, your job is to create moments of truth. And data is the ultimate truth teller. So what you want to do is you want to embrace a few simple pieces of data and a few metrics to make sure that you're on the right path and to make sure that your bias is not leading you towards a completely wrong direction because your internal compass is all messed up. If we get to it at the end of this webinar, I might tell you a story of how just recently, just a few months ago, we ran an experiment with an intern on the sales side, and we were pretty certain that for a year we had operated under the assumption that a certain type of activity is leading to increased results. We had kind of data to back that up, but it was very casual, very highly biased data. We were looking at certain sales numbers and we were connecting correlation and causation, right? We were thinking that a certain type of activity was causing a certain type of results, but we really never had the data to back it up. And then we put that intern on it, and the results blew our minds. And I'm gonna, if we get to it at the end of the webinar, share what that was. And kind of it reinforced how important it is to test everything with data to make sure that you're on the right track. The next thing that I want to just set up to set the stage is that there's a dramatic difference between you as a startup, between being in sales exploration mode versus you being in sales execution mode. These are dramatically different modes of operation. I think too many startups are mixing those two up, and the kind of data that you're looking for, depending on which stage you're in, is very, very different. So you want to make sure that you know which stage you're in terms of your sales life cycle. So what's the difference between the two of them? When you are in what you're trying to do when you're in exploration mode is basically find a sales model that's both predictable and scalable, which means that if you do a certain type of activity, if you create a certain type of input, you're going to generate with a high level of accuracy a certain type of output. So in practical terms, the moment that you can say, hey, we know what our revenue numbers are going to look like 3 months from now, and you're like plus minus 10% right and accurate on it, you have a predictable sales model. Awesome, right? That's the first goal you have. Is the first thing you try to do is generate a bunch of sales, but not just to get revenue, but to also explore which model works how and which model will work how well for your business and your startup, and to find a model. Once you have something that kind of works, what you're trying to test it against is predictability. Can we now do this and generate predictable results? It doesn't even matter if the results are not amazing. Like if you're saying, yeah, we can't predict the results, that they're just not really awesome, that's still fine. Like even if they're predictably bad, I'd rather have predictably bad results than have unpredictably good results. You want to find a model where you have some sort of control over. And once you get to predictability, the next big question becomes scalability. All right, we know how to do certain things that generate certain results, and we know how to repeat that, how to teach other people how to do it, and how to predictably generate these results. Awesome, check that off your list. The next thing now is, are these things scalable? If we added more and more people, or if we spend more and more money, or if we did more of these things, would we generate the same type of results at scale? And if not, what would we have to do to get scalable results? That's the second thing. Once you get both things right, once you have a predictable and scalable sales model, you're in sales execution mode. At that point, it's all about hiring the VP of sales and bring in tons and tons of salespeople and creating a nationwide sales force and hiring, recruiting, training, compensation plans, all that good stuff. But before you get to that, you're in exploration phase. And in exploration phase, there's really 3 simple steps to get to epiphany and get to that sales execution phase. And that is step number 1, figuring out who your ideal customer is. Step number 2, figuring out how to get to that customer, what lead sources you can generate. And only step number 3 is really figuring out the best way to sell to these people, right? What is the right sales process to sell to these types of people? You need to figure out these 3 things, and then you have a predictable and scalable sales model. So you need to make sure that you check and track things on those 3 levels very early on. The customer profile one is probably the one most people overlook. Most companies don't go narrow enough and define their customer profile really, really narrowly at the beginning. And that is also a cause for data pollution and dilution. A lot of times people come to me and they say, hey, Steli, you know, it's funny, we sent 1,000 cold emails every single month, but our results are totally all over the board. And you know, one month we are doing well, and the next month we're doing really bad, and these results are all over the place. Like, why? And even without looking at any of the data, I can just ask them this one question, which is, oh, you're sending 1,000 emails every month? Cool. Who is your ideal customer? The answer typically is something like, well, our ideal customer, Steli, is any company between 2 and 2,000 employees. Well, that's not narrow enough. If you don't have a very narrow customer profile, if you haven't segmented your outreach really well, you're spraying and praying, and you're generating results that are all over the place and generating data that's all over the place because you are approaching completely different businesses and putting them all in the same bucket. So you want to make sure that the early days you go very, very narrow, and I want it to be so narrow that you say, Steli, oh my God, this circle that I've drawn of my ideal customer profile is so narrow. It's only 4 companies in the world. Awesome. Let's go get those 4 companies. And once you've filled out that little circle, I want you to draw a circle slightly larger around it, and then one slightly larger around it. And you draw larger and larger circles till hopefully eventually you've circled around the entire planet, right? But to begin with, you want to go really narrow, and when you do massive outreach, you want to segment really well. Otherwise, your results are going to be all over the place, right? The next thing is lead sources. This is actually easy. There's a bunch of sources of leads. You need to, you know, if you're doing inbound, obviously you can do PR, you can do SEO, SEM, and a bunch of other things to generate interest and traffic to your site and have people sign up for things. If you're doing outbound, you can buy lists, scrape lists, or research lists. That's pretty much it. I mean, that's really it. And what you want to make sure that you are, when you are approaching lead sources, that the quality of data that you're getting from there is really, really good. This is another thing. A lot of times people say, well, Steli, we bought 10,000 leads from this database, and our idea is that we're going to email those 10,000 people, and you know, let's say 1,000 of them will respond positively, and we're going to close 100 new customers through it. Well, that's all nice and good, but the problem is that most databases, when you buy lead lists from them, I would say about 30 to 40% of the data is outdated, so it's wrong. It's emails that don't exist anymore, phone numbers that don't exist anymore, people that don't work at those companies anymore. So if you know that, your 10,000 list all the way is shrinking down to just 6,000, right? So now you're going from 6,000 to 600 to 60 and not 100, and that's 40% less results than you wanted, even in that rosy example, independently from if that would work or not. But that's a big difference. So you want to make sure that you set your expectations correctly when you are tapping into these different lead sources, and you are aware and you test the data quality on a small scale first. And then sales process, and this is the one that we're going to dive in right now a little bit more. That's actually pretty simple. You know, you're doing inbound or outbound sales, which means, you know, you're either responding to inbound interest, or you're going and, you know, doing cold email, cold calling, showing up at people's offices or restaurants or places, knocking on doors, and generating prospects and move them down the funnel. And you can do emails, calls, demos. You can do that through your office, or you can even go out and have field sales. There's a finite amount of things that we can do. Let's look at some of those things. Before we even get to that, here's my fundamental principle when it comes to data and sales. Start simple, because complexity will happen all without your help. Like, you want to start as simple as humanly possible on the data you're tracking, because you want to make sure that you are consistently tracking data. This is one of the things the whole data thing, one of the things that sucks about it, and one of the things why Chart.io is so awesome, is that they simplify the whole process. But the thing that I see a lot of companies struggle with and fail ultimately with is that they start way too ambitious on the amount and the type of data they want to track. They make it so complex that then it's impossible to actually get signals from the data and make the data actionable, and it's even harder to consistently track the data and analyze the data. So what a lot of companies do is they make this big push and they go, data is really important, we need to track data, 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 data. They spend like 3 weeks on the data, they create these massive dashboards, these massive spreadsheets, and then 6 months down the line when you ask them, hey, what happened with that thing? They're like, oh yeah, nobody looks at it anymore, it was not that useful, we should, we could, we would, we must, but we're not. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that whatever data you track consistently and you look at and analyze consistently. Consistency is more important than anything else. I'd rather have you just track one number every fucking day, every week, every month, every quarter for the next year than you tracking 100 pieces of data just for a week, right? This doesn't do anything. So start as simple as possible. Start so simple that it feels like it's too little. That's usually a good place to start. Now, what is my framework of what kind of sales metrics to track? I have a very, very simple model. Here's how I think about this. You want to track sales metrics on 3 levels: activity, quality, and conversion. So that means in sales is an activity sport, right? It really is a performance activity sport. So you need to have a certain type of quantity of activity to know that you're moving the needle. So you need to be tracking how active are we? What is the activity that we're generating in any given area? But then activity in itself is worthless if the quality of that activity is really low, right? So you need to track are we not just doing a lot of things, but the things we're doing are high enough quality. And then when you track that, then you need to look at, okay, so we're doing the right activity, it is at the right level of quality. Now, what is the conversion? How many of these interactions lead to a next step that we've designed along our funnel? I'll give you a very practical example of that AQC mind frame, activity, quality, conversion. Let's take cold calls as an example. Let's say we're doing a bunch of cold calling, right? So a lot of times what people tell me is they tell me, Steli, we're doing 100 cold calls every day. Excuse me. We're doing 100 cold calls every day, and we are closing 5 deals every day, right? So 100 calls, 5 closes. Steli, what can we do to improve that metric? And I tell them, I don't fucking know. Like, I have no clue because I'm lacking the entire funnel. Here's the funnel that I would look at, the numbers I am tracking when I do cold calling. I want to track the activity, which is 100 dials. Then I want to know what is the quality of the activity, and that is what is the number of reaches, is step number 1. So reach rate is a super crucial point in cold calling. It is why a lot of startups don't like to do calls because, you know, most of the time you listen to voicemails and you listen to dial tones, right? So you're wasting a huge amount of time. So you need to know, when we do 100 dials, how many decision makers do we actually reach? That's your most important number to track. That is the most crucial number in cold calling. And you know, if that number is below 15%, you're dead in the water. It does not matter how great your pitch is. It doesn't matter how great your leads are, how great your pitch is, how great anything is. If you reach less than 15%, your cold calling outbound campaign is going to be really, really painful to make work. If you're at 15%, you're kind of okay, but it's not a great place to be. Anything above 15%, you're doing well. So I need to know, how many people do you reach? So we dial 100 people. Let's say we're reaching 15 people. How many of those are qualified? How many of the decision makers that we reach, after we talk to them and we ask them a bunch of questions, do we determine, yes, this is a great lead and we can help them and they can help us? How many of them truly qualify? So let's, in this example, let's say out of the 15 reached leads, 10 truly qualify. And then I look at how many of the qualified leads that are the decision makers I've reached, I've talked to, and I've qualified. How many of those can I close, not necessarily immediately to become a customer, but convert and close to the next step, whatever it is. Let's do a demo, let's do a pilot, sign you up for a trial, whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish on that cold call. and let's say from 10 qualified, I do 5 closes, right? If that is my funnel, now I have good visibility on the activity. Activity is $100. I have a good visibility on the quality. The quality is how many reaches and how many qualifies do I have. And now I know what the conversion is. The conversion is 5 closes. If I have that type of overview, if I track that data and those metrics, I now have the ability to analyze what's working and what's not. So let's take an example and say, Steli, we're doing $100, but we're only closing 1 deal. What can we do to fix this? My question is, what's your reach rate? If your reach rate is 2 people out of 100, there's nothing we can do to improve your sales pitch. There's literally nothing we can do to improve your conversion number. The number one thing we need to do is figure out why you're only reaching 2 out of 100. And can we do something to increase your reach rate? Is it that you have a lot of bad phone numbers? Is it that you're calling at the wrong time a day, the wrong day? Are you calling the wrong person? What is up with it? Or are you trying to cold call into a market where your ultimate decision maker is not communicating over the phone, is not picking up the phone during the day, is not buying from the phone? Like, we need to analyze what the problem is. But that's the number one thing that I would look at, not like what's the sales pitch, let's improve the PowerPoint, let's add more case studies. All that shit is irrelevant, right? If we're only reaching 2 out of 100, there's nothing we can do. Your close rate is fine. Now, let's say that $100 and 1 close, let's say in that example, our reach rate is fine. Let's say we reach 15 people, but only 2 are qualified. Again, now your close rate is fine. The problem is that we have bad leads with bad quality of data. We're spending all this energy and all this effort calling people we should never call in the first place. If out of 15 people I reach, only 2 qualify, that means my lead lists are bad. Like, we need to improve the quality of lead lists. And if, let's say, only if I dial 100 people, I reach 15, let's say 10 are qualified, and I only close 1, think about it. I have 10 people that are decision makers that spend time talking to me, that are fully qualified, and I know I can help them, and I know they can help me, and we figure that out together. If out of those conversations, out of 10 of those, I can only close 1 to the next step, something is wrong with my pitch. Only then do I improve the pitch. The problem is, because most companies, most startups don't track that data, don't keep track of that type of framework of analytics, they don't know, so they don't know what to fix. So they go where it's easiest to go, where your bias is forcing you to go, which is, I guess our sales pitch needs to be better. Let's do more sales training. Like, sales training ain't gonna do shit, right? It's not gonna move anything if you're only reaching 2 people. You need to keep track, and the framework, again, is a simple one. Activity, quality, conversion. Very simple. AQC. What's the activity we do? What's the quality of activity? What's the conversion? People tell me, we're not closing enough in our outbound cold calling campaign. My first question, what's my first question? My first question is, how many dials do you make a day? We make about $5 a day. All right, not enough. You need to do more. And we're going to talk about benchmarks a little later. You need to do more. If they say, well, we do about $100 or $200 a day, I'll say, cool, what's your reach rate? That's my very next question. I go down the funnel. What's your reach rate? All right, out of your reach rate, what's the qualifying rate and what's the conversion rate? And only then, when I have a full picture, can I identify where the problem is and where the biggest opportunities for improvement are. As a general rule, you always want to start optimizing at the top of the funnel, because that's going to have obviously the biggest impact at the end of the funnel. So the first thing you need to optimize when you do cold calls is your reach rates. Cold or inbound or outbound, even if you do inbound calls, like if you have a lot of inbound trials and you're calling these trials, the number one thing you want to improve is your reach rate. It's going to be the biggest enabler of productivity on the sales side of things. How many people that you call that sign up for a trial do you actually reach? If you call within 5 minutes, your reach rate is going to be 100 times larger, 100 times larger than if you call them an hour later. I'll say that again. If somebody signs up for a free trial or a demo and you call them an hour later, you're going to have 100 times less reach rate than if you called them 5 minutes after they signed up. Just think about that. Reach rate is crucial. And after reach rate, it's qualifying rate, and only then it's about closes, all right? Very simple. This is not like a million different things. A very simple framework, but very, very powerful. All right, next, let's talk about some of these benchmarks, right? So I'll give you 2 examples on cold calls and cold emails, because those are areas where I'm quote-unquote an expert on. So When you do cold calling campaigns, your reach rate needs to be 15% or higher. I mentioned this earlier. If you're below 15%, you're dead in the water. Stop doing anything you're doing. Stop making calls. Stop improving your pitch. Stop giving trainings, and figure out what can we do to increase our reach rate. Good cold calling campaigns typically have a 25 to 35% reach rate. That's when beautiful things can happen and you're doing really, really well. If you're 15%, you're fine. If you're at 10 or 5, you're in trouble. You're in a world of pain. You need to fix that first. When it comes to qualifying rate, out of the people that you reach, you need to qualify a really high rate of people, because that means that you've generated a lead list of really high quality, so that all this activity, all these calls, all this effort and energy and resources that you put into reaching these people is worthwhile, because when you reach somebody, you want to have a really high rate of qualifying people, right? Ideally, I look for 50% or higher qualifying rate, but at the minimum, you want to be at 30%. Again, if you're lower than 30%, you spend all this time calling, you spend all this time trying to reach people, and then when you reach them, most of them you should have never tried to talk to. Again, that's your issue. That's the thing we need to fix. And then your closing rate needs to be really, really damn high. Out of the people that are qualified, you better get 50% or a higher percentage to convert to the next step, or you're bad at selling, right? You're really bad at selling, because these are only the people that you are talking to. You had a conversation with, they're the decision maker, and they're qualified. You need to do really well there, all right? Very, very simple math. Let's look at it from a cold email perspective. On the cold email side of things, you want to have an open rate of 30% or higher. Again, if I do cold emails and I only have 10% open my email, I know that my problem is either deliverability and quality of emails, depending on the amount of bounces I get, or most likely, and my subject line. This is another thing that is crazy about sales emails. People think because the body of the email has more words, it's more important. So they spend 80% of the time on writing the body of the email and 20% of the time writing the subject line. I want you to go reverse. 80% of your time should be spent on the subject line, only 20% on the body, because most people will never open your email. So optimizing on getting just a few more people to open it can make a dramatic difference in your entire funnel and effectiveness of your outbound emailing campaign. So just to give you a benchmark, if you do less than 30% on open rates, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. Your subject line is really bad, or your deliverability, the email, the quality of emails that you're sending out is really bad. So you need to fix that first. Don't add more case studies. Don't add more videos. Don't have more attachments in your email. Don't do any of that. Don't send more emails as a solution to this. Fix the open rate first. Out of the people that are opening your cold emails, your sales emails, you want to have a response rate that's 30% or higher, ideally 50%. Response rate does not mean positive response. It could also mean thanks but no thanks. But you want a high number of human beings that open your email and read it to feel the urge to respond and tell you yes, no, whatever, right? So you need to be at least at a 30% response rate. And then when it comes to conversion rate, out of the ones that respond, obviously you want a very high percentage to convert into whatever it is that you're selling them to, a demo, a call, a scheduled call, a trial, whatever it is, a webinar. You want that last number to be very, very high. All right? Cool. So let's go through a list of potential metrics we can track, and then we'll go into the Q&A section. So very, very simple on the email side of things. Again, activity, quality, conversion, right? We want to track the number of emails that we send, the open rates we're getting, the response rates we're getting. On calling, we want to track how many dials do we make, how many reaches, how many people do we reach, how many people do we qualify, and then a little further down the funnel, we want to just figure out, how many opportunities do we create? Opportunities meaning, we really think that we can close this deal, this qualified prospect could become a customer in a reasonable amount of time, and how many of those opportunities end up being lost or won. Just keep it super, super simple. And if you use a system like Chart.io, you can really beautifully put these numbers together and visually represent them in a really easy way. And when you use a CRM like Close.io, all these numbers are tracked automatically. All the emails you send, all the calls you made, everything is in the system. You have to do zero manual data entry, and because of that, you'll have all that data at very high levels of accuracy without any time spent on it on a manual level. All right, let's do some Q&As. I'm excited to hear some of the questions that you guys have.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Steli. So we have a few questions. First one, you refer to yourself as an expert in hustling. How do you suggest hustling to contact the decision makers, and what is the difference when tackling a large organization versus a mid-sized one?
All right, so yes, I do identify with the word hustling from a perspective of making things happen in the universe, like making moves to make things move, to make things happen. When it comes to like the difference between interacting, communicating, or reaching decision makers in smaller businesses than larger ones, really, I don't know if I think, like I've learned to think about it differently. I remember talking to Gary Vaynerchuk, that some of you might know, who used to sell wine to end consumers in a small liquor store, and today is running a very large social media agency with 500 employees in New York and is selling multi-million-dollar contracts to the Fortune 500. And I once asked him, hey, Gary, what was the transition like selling to like an end consumer that comes in to buy a $20 bottle of wine versus selling the CEO or the chief marketing officer of Procter & Gamble on a multi-million-dollar deal? And he looked at me and he went, there, I don't understand the question. There's no fucking difference to me. I always sell to Bob and Mary. I always sell to a human being. There's no such thing as Procter & Gamble buying my product or my services. It's always a person in front of me. The difference between large enterprises and small ones is that in large enterprises you have many, many more human beings that are involved in the decision-making process. That adds complexity to the sales cycle. But fundamentally, I want you to always think of I'm dealing with people here, and with large companies, I'm dealing with many, many people, and with some people that have a lot higher demand on their time, that are a lot harder to reach, but I'm always dealing with people. So that's one. Then the second thing is that when you're trying to reach, in the SMB sector, a lot of times it's very easy to find research the decision maker and then approach them directly. When you do large enterprise sales, you might want to check out a book from a really good friend of mine. It's the book called Predictable Revenue. It's from Aaron Ross. He used to be the first enterprise sales guy at Salesforce and scaled the enterprise sales side of the business for Salesforce back in the day to $100 million. And he used the methodology where when he tried to approach really large organizations, he would go one or two levels above the decision maker and ask for introduction down. So let's say he wanted to sell to a marketing director, he would go and email the chief marketing officer with a very short email. There's a template, he describes it in the book, saying, hey, here's what we do in a sentence around the marketing side of things. Can you point me in the right direction? Who's the right person to have a 10-minute conversation to see if this would be a good fit for you guys? And they got really good response rates and getting a good amount of top-level executives sending an introduction email down the chain and then being able to find the ultimate person within the large organization to sell to. So that's definitely, if you want to sell to large enterprise, you need to find more creative ways. It's usually really hard to find the direct decision maker and approach them on a one-on-one level. So I highly recommend reading Predictable Revenue from Aaron Ross if you want to check that out.
Great. Thank you so much. Just a follow-up to that, how do you handle rejection at either a large company, if it is what you do, which is you go around to get to a different person, or if it's a smaller organization, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. It depends. I think that typically when somebody rejects me outright, I think that too many times we take silence as rejection. So you send an email, you send another email, you don't hear anything, you go, you feel rejected. Or you had a great call, they said, yes, they're interested, send me information, you send them information, you never hear back from them, you feel rejected. You need to fight that, right? You need to keep following up indefinitely until you get a yes or no. But both are good results. Yes is good data, no is good data, maybe is killing you because it's no data whatsoever. Right? There's no real signal. There's nothing to learn when you're like, I don't know what happened there. That's killing startups. You want to create moments of truth. You want to create real results. So coming back to the question, when somebody tells you, no, we're not interested, you can do two things. Depending on the amount of leads you have, you might just want to move on in life. If you have a good sized pool, oftentimes it's not worth trying to go back again and again and again and again. At least not in the early days. Maybe at the time at scale it makes sense, but in the early days it might not. But if you have a very small pool of leads, very small pool of companies you can sell to, then you need to figure out a way around rejection. And to me, you need to, on the one hand, accept it, embrace it, but communicate in one way or another that no in your world will mean not yet. So if somebody tells you no, you go, hey, I will respect this. Give me a minute and explain to me why, so that I don't keep following you around, emailing you, calling you, and investing all this time because I'm not yet sold on that we can't help you. What are your exact reasons? What is the problem? Why? Try to get them to sell you on why no is a good decision. If they can't, at the end you can say, you know what, I'll respect it. Is it, I'm going to be checking in with you maybe every 3 months to see if the timing is going to be right, if something is going to change, if that's cool with you. And then you just keep following up with them and keep in touch with them. In some cases, people have been a lot more aggressive, a lot more creative, and they gotten a no, and then they sent the person, I don't know, a gift that was like a book that was like, why you should never accept the first no. And it's like with a little handwritten note in there that says, this book changed my life. It might explain why I'm gonna keep calling you and emailing you even after you told me no. I appreciate the honesty. I appreciate that you took the time, and I hope that after reading this book, you're gonna appreciate my persistence. Right? That's kind of a clever, creative way to say, yes, you said no to me, but I'm gonna keep, being on your case. When does it make sense versus not? How much should you follow up? How much should you take a no for a no or not? Depends on your situation, depends on your market, depends on the company you're at. In some cases, I would not follow up a no at all, and in other cases, I would hunt the prospect down in eternity until I get that no turned around to a yes. It all depends. I don't have a cookie cutter answer that I would apply to any company at any situation. It really depends on your situation. If you want to know more, just shoot me an email at steli@close.io. Describe your specific situation. I can tell you what I would do if I were you.
Awesome. I definitely like the persistence of that answer. So we have one here, and it is, who is the best decision maker to get in contact with in order to sell tech? Would that be marketing, sales, IT, management, directors, CEO?
I don't know. I mean, it depends on what you're selling and who you're selling to. But the question to me is indicating that you need to go out there and mingle and talk to your potential customers to learn more about them. What you want to do in these early days is not try to go and sell immediately, but what you try to do is go and build friendships and create insights. So what I would do if I were you, I would try to reach out to a bunch of people that work at the type of companies that I think might be selling to, and I would just send them an email and say, hey, I'm building this new innovative technology. I'm trying to get advice from expert in this field. Can I, buy you lunch or coffee or just jump on a 10-minute conversation and get your expert advice? People like to be experts. People like to give advice. So a bunch of them will take you up on it. And then on that call, genuinely ask for advice. Tell them, here's what I'm building. Here's what I'm thinking. How I'm going to be selling this. What do you think? Is this a good idea, a good product? Who in your company would buy this? How would you approach me trying to sell to your company if you were in my shoes, and just try to learn more about it? I don't think there's a universal answer, unfortunately. I can tell you that all companies in all industries, in all markets, buy all technologies in a similar type of way. Of course, many times it could be the technical department if it's a technical product, but many times you might have a technical product that helps the marketing team or the sales team, and the technical department is only coming in at the last stage in the implementation stage, still playing a critical role. It still might be blocking the deal if they feel like the tech is not secure or not the right, whatever else it is, but they might not be the decision maker at the top of the buying process. So I don't know. You need to do some research. You need to go out there and meet and talk and converse with potential buyers and get their advice and learn about how they buy the type of technology that you're thinking of selling, and based on what they tell you, you design a sales model that works.
Great response. So I just remembered that you had mentioned at the beginning that you would tell us about an experience that you had with your intern, and I don't believe you had time at the end to explain it.
No, that's a good point. So I'll make this super short. The thing that happened was that we at Close.io, we're getting an insane amount of inbound leads. Lots and lots of companies come every day, go to Close.io, they sign up for a 14-day free trial, and they take our sales software for a spin to see, they're sending emails, they're making calls, they're trying it out, they're looking at the data that we generate to decide if this is going to be the right tool for them. And what we like to do is we like to call these people within 5 minutes of sign up. And by now it's such high volume that we have to prioritize who we call and who we don't. But we always assume that when we call more people and when we reach more people in the early types of the trial, it affects our conversion numbers and our revenue numbers pretty dramatically. So we had hired a number of junior people to increase the amount of to deal with the increased amount of leads. And then over the summer, we had to let go of some of those people that didn't work out. And what we did is with this intern is we ran a test where we wanted to see how big of a difference does it make having 3 junior SDRs doing all these inbound calls versus having just 1 junior SDR doing inbound calls? What is the net revenue impact? And we had some hypothesis on the percentage in revenue change that we thought it would probably have. And I could swear for months and months and months, whenever we did 3 versus 1, I could swear I thought I saw a revenue change. Like I thought I saw an immediate impact in revenue. So I was pretty convinced about this. Kevin Romani, who's like running our sales team, was pretty convinced about this. We were both super biased. So she ran that experiment, and we kind of just did it on this. We didn't really pay too much attention to it because we thought this would just prove that we were right with this. And then we were wrong. And the data was so clear. It made 0 difference. 3 versus 1 made no difference whatsoever. The revenue changes were affected by a complete different set of rules and impacts, but it was not the amount of SDRs that we're calling. It was, when we had 1 versus 3, the main difference really was which leads were we calling. And when we were calling the high quality leads, that was really what made 99% of our revenue goals. And the other 1% of our, the other 99% of our leads that were not as high quality, all these calls really didn't move the needle at all. So we wasted a lot of energy calling all these people that really didn't convert into anything. And that was something that was super surprising to us and showed again that even when you think you see the impact of things immediately and you create these like correlation and causation models and go, oh, this affects this number, and you're pretty certain of it, you might want to make sure that you track the data correctly and that you analyze it correctly because you might be surprised. And this was a surprising thing that we learned.
That is really, really interesting. And it does show how your bias can affect a lot of things. So I know we have a few more minutes left and we have a couple more questions. One is, what percentage of time, in your opinion, should be spent on cold calls versus cold emails?
You're going to see a pattern here. I'm going to again say, I don't know. I mean, it depends on your business. In some businesses, you should do 100% of your time cold calling because emails really don't work that well. In other businesses, you should do almost exclusively cold emails and don't do any cold calls. And in many businesses, it's kind of a mix. It depends. So I don't want to always just say it depends. As benchmarks or rule of thumb, I would tell you to test these things. Test only cold emails, only cold calls, cold emails in a mix, and look at the data and see if there's any difference. But as general rules, the more senior the people you sell and the larger the organizations that you're selling into, the less effective cold calling is typically. Because the CEOs in many companies, VPs of marketing or CMOs, whatever it is, CTOs, they don't necessarily pick up the phone when there's an unknown number that calls them at a time where there's nothing scheduled, right? So, and there's a way to get beyond the gatekeeper and just call the secretary and get through it, but it's a lot of work. So usually it's not the best model to make things happen. In today's world, where a lot of executives just live in email and only have calls when they're scheduled, there might not be a secretary to put you through. It's not the 80s anymore, right? So, so when you do very large organizations, cold calls might be a total waste of your time. Usually, if you sell to people that are easily identified, specifically professionals like accountants, lawyers, teachers, people that you might be selling to, but that you can easily find on the web. You can find their phone number, their contact details, and they do pick up the phone when somebody calls them, even if it's an unknown number. In those cases, you might have great success with cold calls. So I don't have a perfect formula that I would apply to any company, any product, or any market. That does not exist. My advice to you is to experiment, try all three models, and see what works best. But as a guiding line, if you sell to really the larger the organization, the less effective typically cold calling is. The smaller the organization, even more importantly, if it's just even a professional, just one individual, a super tiny office or a restaurant or something of that nature, cold calling can be super effective. So it really depends.
Great. And what sample size do you suggest would kind of give you that significant enough data to make decisions around?
Yeah, here we're coming back to the reality, the messy realities of startups where, most likely you will not have enough time to get perfect data to make perfect decisions. So you'll have to be somewhat pragmatic, get some data, and make the best decision possible based on that. And what you want to do is you want to optimize for speed versus optimizing for perfection or for being right. I'd rather be wrong 3 times in a row really fast than being right really, really fucking slowly. In a startup world, being slow is the kiss of death. So what I would suggest there is, those are very, very basic rules here, but when it comes to cold calling, you definitely need to have a good volume. So you can't just do 50 cold calls and say that's a sample size that's meaningful. You probably want to do 100 cold calls or more a day, maybe 100 to 200, and you definitely want to do this for probably 2-3 weeks to gather enough data to know what's going on. It's statistically still not going to be enough, but you need to work with what you have, and you need to move quickly. So you want to generate, maybe 1,000, maybe 2,000 cold calls, and kind of generate a funnel down the line based on that. And with emails, cold emails is the same thing. I would never just send thousands of emails in one big take. That's a very bad idea. You're going to get blacklisted. All kinds of problems are going to come up. So what I would do with cold email campaigns, for instance, is send, let's say, 25 to 50 cold emails, but send them every single day. And, every 2 weeks or so, you might want to take a look at the results you're getting and tweaking them. And yes, even 2 weeks, if you do 50 emails a day, is not really statistically enough data to make perfect decisions. But again, this is a startup, and you don't have the luxury of time to amass all information and all data to always make the right choices. You need to optimize to moving fast. So, a few thousand cold calls, a few thousand emails, that's kind of the operating model where you see patterns, and then you still have to use some amount of instinct and make adjustment and corrections based on that.
Great. And we have just one last question, and it's how can a startup best sell to large companies? And I just want to add to that, which is usually larger enterprise companies have bigger names using their products, so it's a bit easier to add in your cold email. Like company X, Y, and Z use our product. How can you get around that as a startup?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. There's a number of things you can do, right? So you need to create trust and credibility in any way that's available to you. So if you have great customers, awesome. Name the customers. And it might be brand names, but it might be that the individual at the company has credibility. So I'll give you an example. You might have a customer that's like DCC Incorporated. Nobody has ever heard of them. Nobody knows what I'm talking about. But John, Bedford there, who's the VP of sales and bought my product, he was a veteran at sales at IBM and SAP, and he has a corporate career that's really impressive. Then I'll use that, right? If I don't have an impressive customer name or impressive customer individual, look for anything else that you have. Do you have press? Do you have investors? Are you associated with any kind of a university or organization that has credibility? Any type of credibility is good credibility, and when you don't have any, your job is to create some. And how do you create some? You hustle. Like you just there's no easy route. Like how do you lose a ton of weight? You eat broccoli and you work out. Like you do the basics. It's gonna be a hustle. It's gonna be some work, and a lot of times you might have to get a few small customers and a few small press outlets right up at you, and until you get to bigger and bigger ones, and you're able to sell into these very large organizations. But you need to find a way to create credibility one way or another, and you need to be pragmatic about it. And at the beginning, part of what you do is you're trying to do things that will generate credibility so you can go and get more customers with it.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Steli. All of your answers and your presentation really had me walk away with a lot, and I can't wait to share it with the rest of our sales team. So I believe you want to just talk really quickly about.
Yeah, I have two more things to offer before I go. Number one, I've written 3 books about startup sales, right? There's the Ultimate Startup Guide to Outbound Sales, the Ultimate Startup Guide to Inbound Sales, and then those 2 books combined made the Ultimate Startup Guide to Sales. If you guys are interested, these books are selling for $20 a piece. We've sold thousands of copies. If anyone that was part of the webinar can get these 3, the virtual, the PDF copies, as well as the Kindle versions and ebook versions for free, just send me an email at steli, S-T-E-L-I, at close.io and say, books, dude, or something like Chart.io a webinar, and I'll send you these copies for free. It's my honor and pleasure to do that. A lot of the stuff that we covered today is in there, and a lot more stuff is in there. And then also make sure.
Steli?
Oh, hey, can you still hear me?
Yeah, I think you went on mute
Awesome.
for a second.
All right. So the last thing that I'm going to offer is take the free email course that I have. So if you go to close.io/free-sales-course, you can type in your name and email address, and you'll get. It's not a 30-day course anymore. We bumped it up to 90 days, and it's just every few days a lesson in an email. It's super simple, digestible, and it's a lot of tactical stuff, sales scripts, email templates, lots and lots of goods, all battle tested. So all like an insane amount of knowledge and experience has influenced that email course, and people love it and get a lot of value out of it. So if you like the webinar, you're probably going to love the email course. And you know, as a last thing, if people want to get in touch with me, I'm very easy to get in touch with. Just shoot me an email at steli, S-T-E-L-I, at close.io. More than happy to answer any more questions, to support you, and do anything I can to help you guys run data-driven sales machines and ultimately succeed with your startups and your dreams and your goals.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you all for staying until the end. I'll make sure to send out the recording and slides tomorrow morning. And I will also put a link in there to Steli's email so you can send him a reminder about the books. And just one last thing, we hope to see you all next week for our webinar with Sarah Battaglia around creating a marketing department playbook to ensure your Q4 success. So thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week.
See you guys. Bye-bye.